Senator, you have 8 minutes.
And Minister Oireachtas on bringing this piece of legislation here to the House today for second stage. I look forward to, with my colleagues, supporting the legislation. It is a very important piece of work. It was my privilege, along with Senator Boyhan and Senator Cummins and Senator Siri Carney and others, to do the pre-legislative scrutiny in the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Housing, Local Government and Heritage. It is a really, really important piece of legislation, and we learned that when you do great things, your legacy remains after you. And I think in doing this, you are doing a great thing. And I think this will be a really important part of your legacy, and I congratulate you on that. Because we are all just passing through, and we have to use our time, or we should use our time, as productively and as valuably as possible. Heritage, to me, is it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's got intellectual, cultural, educational, social and economic value to us. Our heritage is who we are. It informs who we are. It's what makes us unique. And this piece of legislation, I suppose, is an important response from the state. It's an assertion, let's say, from the state of the value the state will place on heritage. The legislation and the enshrining in legislation the value of heritage creates a link between the past and the present, and ideally a bridge into the future. It helps us understand where we come from, how we got to where we are today, and hopefully those experiences and those learnings and those failures will inform how we move forward in the future. It helps to create a sense of identity and a sense of belonging. And it is our opportunity to pass on to future generations all of the learnings that we made from our successes and our failures. But once heritage is destroyed, that's it. It is gone forever. And that's why it is so important that the bill is effective, that the bill is fit for purpose, and the bill will lead us into the future. And I suppose the Heritage Council itself reported, back in 2001, it's been far too long in becoming this legislation, but back in 2001, they indicated that over 30% of the state's archaeological monuments had been destroyed since 1840. So that's a terrible legacy, let's say. That's a terrible track record, and I appreciate this legislation aims to, in part as well, ensure that that type of vandalism, that type of destruction is not repeated into the future. Heritage provides a tangible connection to the stories and the experience and the achievements of our ancestors. It's a personal, we all have our own personal heritage. Mine is, from small poor farmers, famine in Mayo, and railway people under the British Empire, and revolution and Fianna Fáil, and the founding of this state, and my own one of emigration and the tech sector, and a modern Ireland. Our country's heritage, Dublin Central, where I live, it's all, the world is constantly changing, but we can all learn from the past, and that's why it is so critically important that the state does take a lead in protecting our heritage. And in terms of the role of, all of the high-profile heritage sites in Ireland, I'm thinking of Newgrange and the Cliffs of Moher and Doubts Passage and Brúnaboyna, a place I've visited recently. But in my own constituency, the Phoenix Park, the GPO, the Royal Canal, someplace I take for granted every day. But O'Connell Street, and Moore Street. And Minister, I obviously can't let today go without talking about Moore Street, and I want to acknowledge those from the Ivy markets. I've had my battle on the north side for the fruit and veg market for a long time. I feel your pain. I share and support Senator Carney, who is working incredibly hard to ensure that the heritage of the Ivy market is protected, is promoted and is sustained into the future, and I'm sure Senator Carney will more than eloquently speak to that. So I'm going to use my last couple of minutes, Minister. I can't leave without talking about Moore Street and the National Monument. And I do want to acknowledge, that in this legislation that there will be, provision in the bill for the integrated licensing system, the statutory codes of practice, the other legal protections that will be conferred on new fines. I think all of that is really, really welcome. The fact that it's replacing legislation from 1930, speaks for itself, really. And the fact that it will allow the state to ratify international conventions and bring our legislation up to date in areas of heritage protection. All of this really, really important. And the new Register of Monuments, I think, is really welcome. And the fact that the bill provides for the state's right of ownership of archaeological objects where no owner is found, that, I think, is really welcome. But I can't finish up today without mentioning Moore Street and the National Monument on 14 to 17 Moore Street. That site is the birthplace of our Republic. Minister, I know you're very familiar with it because I have you haunted about it, and I apologise. But I won't give up, and the people of Moore Street won't give up, the traders of Moore Street won't give up, and I don't believe the Irish people will give up until they actually see a proper 1916 commemorative site centre at 14 to 17 Moore Street. It is long overdue. There is a really fantastic proposal there, endorsed, Minister, you yourself, from when you took office. You've put energy behind it, your own ministerial advisory group. I was honoured to serve on that. And that report, endorsed and broadly welcomed, it has a really high-value proposal there for a quality state-led, state-ran 1916 commemorative site. Minister, I really hope before you finish today, you would be able to update the House on when we will actually see some works commence at Moore Street, at the National Monument at 14 to 17 Moore Street. Because, when we do great things, our legacy remains after us. You have an opportunity to do a great thing. You're doing great work. You are doing great work with this legislation. We will be supporting it through the next stages, and we want to see it enacted promptly. But I also want you to reach further and reach beyond just the legislation into the day-to-day of the operations and protection of our heritage, most particularly the National Monument in Moore Street. Gormagat.